Hello, I'm Dr. Christopher Barker, and welcome to Holding Space. I'm a New Jersey licensed clinical psychologist, and I try to talk about issues of psychology and meaning and trauma, and that's my specialized area of study and things that I'm working on. I like to have on guests whenever I can because, you get tired of hearing just one voice, and sometimes there's such profound stories out there. One of those is from my guest today, who I made contact with through LinkedIn, and we just, started corresponding. Coral Thiel is really a profound voice in the field of speaking up for survivors and being a survivor herself of so many things. Well, I'll let her tell her story to you. It will be much better than any story that I can tell. But Coral, welcome, and I will, and then ask questions if I need to. But just I'm in awe.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on your program, Dr. Barker. It's good to meet you.
Thank you.
And I was profoundly moved by the words you shared with me on LinkedIn under one of my posts about trauma recovery. And you gave me permission to use your quote in a document I was writing that week to the governors of Oregon and Washington, the attorney generals, and all the legislators, and also crime victim advocates and citizens. But my whole story I was proposing new laws for childhood rape victims and abuse victims. Their laws, if a parent leaves you $1, you are not able to appeal like you can in other states. So was a childhood rape victim, and I lost my family's entire estate to my cousin because I spoke and confronted the crimes that were committed against me for years as a child to my family. So my cousin has my family, my brother's 100 acres. Every family member has disinherited and disowned me. So your quote, I'm going to read it now, but it profoundly moved me. It was healing for me to have somebody articulate what my life story is. I put it in the testimony section to the officials I wrote to, but I was writing about that there is a sacred bravery in those who walk into the unknown in order to build a new life that protects them from their family. Abusers have community. Survivors often have isolation. Battered women may lose their babies and children, their homes, their friends, their livelihood. Survivors of childhood rape and abuse will often lose their families. Rarely does society recognize the dimensions and long-lasting effects of this reality for the victim. Victims don't leave abusers, they escape. Some don't make it out with their lives. All are injured. Why didn't she leave? The answer was she wasn't able to escape. And here are your words, Dr. Barker. Quote, leaving implies choice in a neutral environment. Escape implies danger, calculation, survival. When someone exits an abusive dynamic, they are not simply ending a relationship. They are navigating fear, coercion, trauma bonds, financial entanglement, shame, threats, and often a nervous system that has been conditioned to anticipate retaliation. From a trauma perspective, this is not a clean break in time. It is a body trying to outrun a past that still feels present. The hypervigilance doesn't shut off at the door. The grief is real, the confusion is real, the pull to go back can be real. Escape is not weakness. It is an act of nervous system defiance. It is a refusal to stay frozen in someone else's control. And if someone had to escape rather than leave, that tells you everything you need to know about what they were surviving. I thank you for those words.
You're welcome. It was again, your story is so moving that I felt moved to respond. And yeah, surviving is exactly the right word. You escape, yes. You don't choose to leave. You must. And in order to do it, it takes great bravery. It takes courage. It's hard. Well, again, you tell your story better than I do, but if you want to give us a quick rundown of like what you've been through, and I know there's so much, but whatever you can do to sort of like
Yes.
give us a feel for it.
Well, I do have a website too and a published memoir. My memoir is Bonshea, Bonshea, Making Light of the Dark. And I will be putting the document I sent to Oregon and Washington lawmakers and attorney generals, governors, just documenting my life and basically the obscene injustice to go through decades, 6 decades since I was 6 to now. And I will put that on my website at www.coralanikatheill.com. My book, Bon Shia, when I escaped and left, I lost everything, everyone, and my children too. My 8 children and nursing infant. That was the cost. But a Native American woman met me. I believe in quantum physics that what you resonate out, you will draw in often, sometimes when you least expect it. But she would pray with me, and she'd end just praying her prayers with Bon Shia. And I asked her what it meant. And she says it means out of the darkness into the light. It's a Yakia Indian word. And I just knew that instant that would be the title of my book. My subtitle's Making Light of the Dark, which I believe you can take all the horror and traumatic experience, and as you confront it and pick up the shattered pieces of self and go on the journey of healing and wholeness, making light of the dark, it's your medicine inside. Many of your horrific experiences can become your sacred ground underneath you. My story started at 6 years old. My great uncle, it was in Pasco, Washington, had executed his 16-year-old daughter, had attempted to murder his wife, and he was only given 5 or 10 years. I served time at the Walla Walla State Penitentiary. He got out in 5 years, and that was when I was around 6 years old, and he wasn't supposed to live in our city where his ex-wife and remaining daughters lived or be around young girls, but he lived in our home in Kennewick, Washington. I had met him before visiting his prison. I thought that's where he worked. That's what I was told. And my grandparents and parents just had me go up to his bedroom each night. And I was raped for years, threatened. I became adult at 6 years old, and it was a lot to manage. So then you just are threatened not to talk about it. It seems the family embraced my rapist and abuser, even to this day. And I hear my rapes are talked about at family gatherings. Cousins have mentioned that. I do not understand that world. I do not understand the people who enable abusers. It's definitely different spheres. It's hurtful, and I feel the enablers are just as dangerous as the criminals themselves. And I wrote that, and I wrote a list in my document to the Attorney General, and it was a page long, including not just family, but all the systems you have to go to that can, I call it, re-traumatize you, re-victimize you. I had judges laughing about the rapes I suffered. I had attorneys, my ex-husband's attorney, and the judge allowed this. I was humiliated about the childhood rapes I suffered as a child in court in a divorce case. But anyway, my childhood went on, and um, I do um, I do remember moving then finally away about 4 years later, and I was in Federal Way, Washington. My dad was in the Air Force, so we lived near McCord Air Force Base. So I had a couple years of reprieve until he called us, and I was the one to answer the phone early in the morning. Um, and he asked my father to live with us again, and I was just horrified, and my grades just plummeted that year. I was tasked to take care of him, be his caretaker. He was going through withdrawal from alcoholism. And I just remember that a horrific year. And I had to work with them side by side. My father was ill for a while, so um, I uh, helped with finances for our family by logging property and splitting wood that kept them in their home. And then he finally had to leave because he continued in his problem with alcoholism. I was a straight A student in high school, co-valedictorian, honor society president, a pilot by age 17, ground school. I was expected to do all that. And I was always caretaking my mother. My father was gone most of the time. And my brother just lived a different life in our home, very entitled. He could do anything. And there was a lot expected of me. Without any counseling and without a supportive family, other predators find you. I was 18 and going to court reporter school in Portland, Oregon during the fuel crisis. And that's where I met my ex-husband on the bus. And he heard my dad's name mentioned. I just talked to him briefly, but people were talking about my father because he was the pilot for the FBI in the DB Cooper case. That was still something much talked about in the Vancouver, Portland area. And within a week or so, my ex-husband, Marty Warner, was on the porch of my home, my family's home. And I did not know how to get away from my own family. I did not know how to get away from him. And he was getting his master's degree while I was a court reporter in Longview, Washington, and he moved his master's degree to Longview, Washington, where I was, and he'd be sitting on the courthouse steps after I got off work. I guess we would call that stalking today. Anyway, like I say, I did not have counseling and the childhood rapes, and then I had a grandfather that beat me. He was just cruel. He did the same to my father. But between all of that, you just have lost your voice and you lose your identity in those situations, and you're taught to please, not your teachers, the elders around you. And I was raised Lutheran, but a lot of my teachers and fellow students in the Federal Way area where I was for 1 year of high school were, I would call it brainwashing. And they had me go to a Bill Gothard Institute seminar in Seattle every time he arrived there. And then I ended up going in Portland, Oregon, and it was extreme legalism. And uh, they talked about the umbrella protection, the church or the church leaders and your husband and the woman and the children. And thankfully today, Netflix created a film called Shiny Happy People, and it exposes, I call it a cult, and the Duggard family and the dangers of these type of groups. Even it can involve evangelical churches. A lot of churches embrace this ideology, and the women often have no rights. The submission can be to men who have no compass at all. And we live like a handmaid, very similar to the Handmaid series, which I stopped watching because I always knew what was going to happen next week. It was my life. But the film Shiny Happy People talks about how often many churches keep childhood rape, molestation, rape of wives, even a secret. It's not to be reported, especially the children. And they had a situation where his son now is in federal prison. He raped babysitters, his daughters, but it was kept a secret. And that type of situation ended up in my family. And the only difference was I was being threatened by pastors, by my ex-husband. Pastor Bill Hurd was one of them who supported my husband. And it was very frightening. But I said, no, my daughters are not going to grow up like me. They're going to see a doctor. They're going to get counseling. But soon thereafter, I lost my children through the divorce. But my marriage began in Corvallis, Oregon. When I was married 21 years, I tried to escape the first summer. I just knew that I was going to be involved in a very cruel situation that was very similar to my childhood. And I asked for a divorce, but in those days, you didn't have a right to. You had to prove adultery. So 1985, after my fourth child, and after I'd left the People of Praise cult community in Corvallis, Oregon, I did also try to escape, but I had nowhere to go. No monies, no family, no friends outside of the cult. And so our first years of marriage were in the People of Praise community cult in Corvallis, Oregon. It's not too far off from Jim Jones, just the brainwashing, the threats. You had to give your money. My ex-husband gave our home, our deed to our home to them. The deal fell through, so we still had our deed later. But I was under my husband, under his head, under the authority of South Bend, Indiana, where our U.S. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett belongs to the same cult. Her husband and parents, I believe, are leaders, but it was a very frightening experience for years, and I would ask questions. They called me mentally ill. I was put under supervision and special counseling, and then I chose to leave the church, and I wanted out of the cult and wasn't allowed to. I was married. Then I lost two babies, miscarried, some around 4, close to 5 months along. I did not miscarry, I hemorrhaged. So my doctor, Dr. Charles Self in Albany, saved my life those times. And the 1 week I had lost another baby and got home from the hospital, I was forced to go to they called them handmaids meetings. You had meetings every night in this cult practically. And I couldn't go shopping with them. I said, I need to go home and lay down. I'm still hemorrhaging. And I went home. I thought that was a proper thing to do. But the handmaid that I was also under, Connie Hackenbrook, called the leaders. And there was a car waiting for me in men that were babysitting my younger children. And I was just put into the car and taken in front of leaders all night. And I was told I was poisonous and I disobeyed. And the next morning, my husband was told that the community was going to shun me. And some of that community involved even Corvallis, Oregon. Some of the shopkeepers, when I go in the store, would turn their back. They were friends with Father Charles Harris, who was from South Bend, who started the cult at Oregon State University with the Catholic students. So it was a very isolating experience and painful. I wrote in my book that shunning is a cruel form of ridicule. Eventually, I was forced to go to meetings, but they would force me to sit on the floor outside as a form of shunning and humiliation. One man, Dr. Paul Hesberg, has spoke with Dr. Stephen Hassan, a cult expert, by video, describing the abuse he witnessed, even me sitting on the floor outside of meetings. He was my ex-husband's best friend at the time, but he got out of the cult, he and his family, so he's testified on my behalf. I did write the Senate and Judiciary Committee about the crimes committed against me while in this cult, but nobody cared. They call it religion and faith, but I say that people often die in religion and from faith, and I had no freedom. Some of the cult leaders were assigned to watch me. Even when I was being shunned, they'd come to my home and watch me all day so I didn't leave or call anyone. And I wasn't allowed to see family even before this time I was being shunned. My father died. I was not allowed to go see him when he was in emergency. I regret that. Regret that I was in that cult. And some of them came to my father's funeral but didn't even speak to me. They only spoke to my ex-husband. And that was just, I think if I could summarize all my life and all the abusers, predators, and enablers, which includes family and cults and often our systems, cruelty is the point. I believe even around the world, the cruelty that's happening to people because they have power and there's no checks and balances. They're above the law. So I've lived under this type of cruelty.
You know, hearing Coral talk about the things that have happened, we've had a number of lengthy conversations about, I can only say, the trials she has endured. And it's something that people find hard to believe that all of this has happened to one person, but it can. And if you continue to reach for support, and if you are used to trauma, you may find yourself not seeing some red flags. And I don't think in her case it was really the case. I think just somehow she became embroiled in a number of situations that were really bad for her. But to hear these stories is very hard. And I appreciate your listening to it because I think it's all important. And I think all these stories need to be told. We need to stop protecting people who hurt other people. We need to start holding people accountable for what they do. But quite beyond that, we need to be able to hear the people who are survivors. We need to be able to hear their stories. We need to be able to focus on these things as hard as they are to hear. Thank you for tuning in.